You ever worked in an organization and saw so many things you know could be done better? And then you try, successful or not. Or maybe you're that leader that sees those that want to do better, that want to change the culture or fix this thing or that thing. And you want to cultivate similar people in your organization that can do that sort of thing or think that sort of way. Well, these are intrapreneurs. Intrapreneurship is actually growing in popularity. It's certainly growing as a buzzword. So I looked it up through a quick little Google search and found, well, actually, what I found was really interesting. What do you think the number one thing about intrapreneurship is that people Google? What is intrapreneurship? That's right, it's growing in that it's being mentioned a lot, but people still do not know what it is. My guest today will actually tell us what it means, why it's important, and why we should be nurturing it not only in ourselves, but in those around us. Hold on. Hello, I'm Russel Lolliker. Welcome to Relationships at Work, the emerging leader's guide to creating a workplace we love. I'm a communications and leadership nerd that has acquired decades of experience in both of those areas. But there's a through line for me. It's curiosity. Curious about how we can make the workplace a better place because we spend so much time there. This show is an amazing resource for that. Another great show and a companion piece to this show is our YouTube channel, specifically Relationships at Work. YouTube, wow, I don't know about you, but I've added YouTube to my smart TV so that it's like any other streaming service. So when I sit down to watch the Netflix or whatever streaming service there is, YouTube is right there, right parallel, is in priority as a place to find any information or shows that I want. So I thought Relationships at Work would be a great addition to that. Because if you're going to fall down the YouTube rabbit hole, why not jump on Relationships at Work as well? You can just sit back, settle in, and feed your brain on some great leadership, employee experience, and workplace culture guidance. There's some great guests on there too. Scott Stratton, Jen Marr, Kevin Oakes, Dr. Khalifa Oliver, Gary Ridge, Patty Temple Rocks, tons. New episodes are dropping every Friday. They're talking about topics like ageism, unlearning, learning moments, leadership, creating connection, resiliency, more, and growing. Just like and subscribe, as the kids say. One topic that does seem to pop up a lot is innovation. How our organizations can be innovative. What is innovation? Who brings the innovation? Well, that last one is a biggie, and you may know this term or not, but intrapreneurs are usually the ones helping with that innovation. There are a few studies that I'm finding that highlight how great it is, intrapreneurship, for employee engagement and retention. Now, there are those in your organizations see the way things are, and they want to do better and know how to do better. So this episode isn't so much for those particular people. It's more for those wanting to be intrapreneurs and don't know how or how to be heard in their organizations, or those who want to foster an innovative culture and an environment that helps intrapreneurs, but they're not sure what that actually looks like. My guest today, Kareem Rahaman, has built a career as a successful intrapreneur within cultures that aren't typically known for being that supportive. Post-education, for an example. And yet he figured out how to create a path for himself that helped his career and the organizations he was a part of. So how can we do that for our own employee journeys? Or as leaders, how can we help those innovators grow and innovate? Kareem, well, he has some experience with that. Let's get over to him. And on the show today, we have Kareem Rahaman. And here is why he is awesome. He is the new executive director at the Clover Schools. He has found success in helping start two companies, Splash Effect and Skills Camp. He has trailblazed his career through the Canadian higher education system, which I'm really curious to talk about because old school. And he is an intrapreneur at Toronto Metropolitan University and York University. That is where he sort of trailblazed best. And even more best, that's right, all about good English today. Here is Kareem on the show. Hello, sir.
Hey, thank you so much. It's always fun hearing those introductions when you're starting a podcast. You're like, I don't remember doing half that stuff.
And I brought the pom-poms out. I was very energetic, all the coffee.
Loving it.
So
Loving it.
let's get you into the first question, Kareem. Thanks for being here. I ask all of my guests the first question, which is, what's your best or worst, one or the other, employee experience?
I think the best employee experience was literally being able to forge a new sector within the sector. So I came in at like the introduction of social media. So the second position I had at TMU was called a digital community facilitator, because at that point there were very few social media jobs all around. So we didn't know what to call it. But at that time, it was the first social media focused job in Canada. And I kind of moved up at TMU for the 10 or so years I was there. And at that time, we were at a point of real growth. And what was really fun is that I was rarely told no with wild ideas that I came up with that wanted to try. And like, I have no rooting in this, but here's why I think it might work. And most of them paid off. So that employee experience from an employee standpoint was so rewarding, because I got to see ideas come to fruition in an industry that's traditionally slow moving and a lot of red tape and those kind of things. That was a really fun experience. We were like the first on Foursquare, first using geofencing on Snapchat, like all these kind of things that were like no one knew what was going to happen or take flight, but we were able to really leverage that.
And you're talking about intrapreneurship, which is what we're going to talk about today. Because I swear to you, when I was typing in intrapreneurship to do show notes, it kept auto-correcting me to entrepreneurship. It doesn't even MS Word will not acknowledge that it is an actual word. So what are we talking about when we say intrapreneurship?
Yeah, there's a couple ways to define it. And like the way I like to refer to it is cultivating and like bringing up that entrepreneurial mindset, but also, and what's more important to me, is the behavior and the actions in organizations. So it's really big on leveraging people's natural entrepreneurial or entrepreneurial instincts to create something new, start a new idea within large organizations. Usually it can work in small organizations, but yeah, I think it's entrepreneurship in a corporate setting, and without having to take as much risk of going on your own and starting a company, and that fear that all these people have about it. I talk about this in my TED talk, that is really around starting small companies and scaling them. But you're able to do that within big orgs, and I'm seeing it now more, that the companies have almost segmented out a function of their HR to kind of foster this a little bit more. Obviously, not as much in the large government, medical, those kind of things outside of research. But yeah, it's just fostering that mindset and action of entrepreneurial endeavors in a big complex organization.
And that's exactly it. Like I'm sitting here thinking, going, intrapreneurship is only something that's really mentioned around organizations that aren't used to entrepreneurial thoughts. If it's a startup organization or one that's only been around a couple of years, it's just doing your job. It's just presenting new ideas. So it can only exist really in organizations that are more bureaucratic, more rigid, not used to new ideas. Is that where it mainly lies?
I don't know. So like the interesting thing is Google's famous for their 20% rule, where 20% of your time should be allocated towards your own projects. I think Google owns a portion of that IP or whatever that is. And if you think of Google, you think of forward thinking and stuff, but that's a way of fostering it. So I'm with you. I would have thought initially it was like that, but the more I started doing a lot of research into the space, is that it does exist in those forward thinking organizations, and even smaller new startups are starting to segment it out. And I don't think they call it entrepreneurs. They call it like an innovation council or an innovation team or whatever it is. But even now with like banks and stuff, they don't call it that. I think it's just a weird term that's a catch-all for all these things that are happening, and there's no other word for it. So that's why our little paperclip friend on Word will not allow us to use it officially.
Damn you, Clippy. Damn you.
Exactly.
So why would anybody want to be an entrepreneur in an organization? And could anybody be?
Yeah, I think everyone can. I think it leans towards those who are more risk taking, are comfortable with failure. I do think it gives you almost a role of leadership and thought leadership that you might not have otherwise. I mean, if you're just there to clock in and clock out, this is probably not for you. But if you want to push the boundaries and you just show so much more value in your company, you build those leadership competencies, you learn so much around business case design and things like that, that I think really show how invaluable you can be to an organization if that's the organization you want to be with long term or make your mark there, or whatever it is. Or you really wanted to start something, but maybe for reasons that are a little bit more personal, you don't have that risk ability, you don't have that privilege to fall back on something if it doesn't work out. You can take that risk inside an organization if your leadership, and this is the most important thing, allows the space for you to do it and allows that room for failure and risk taking, and understanding that the learning from those risks are going to help the organization one way or the other.
So how has it helped you? I mean, I'm looking at your career. As you mentioned off the top, you've been in a space that is not known for innovation, not known for doing things a little bit more out there, or even going ahead with a risk. It's risk adverse, not even just risk aware. It's known to be quite risk adverse. So
Yep.
how have you navigated personally to get through? Did you start entrepreneurial, or did you see opportunity?
I think I started that way. So I like my first company I started at 15. So like I've always had this entrepreneurial itch. And like ironically, starting at this new job at the Clover School, I knew I went to Montessori, but I didn't know what that meant. And a lot of Montessori is around autonomy and self-directed learning. And like those are traits you'll see from intrapreneurs or entrepreneurs. And I guess I had that since I went through that model of education. But when I started at Ryerson, my first job, before I graduated, I'm like, there's a need here that no one's addressing. So for context, that first job was building relationships with student groups to leverage student services. So when I was a student, I was embedded in the student group culture. Like if there was an event going on campus and attendance was low, they were like, call Kareem. He's going to send a text message out to all the student groups and we're going to fill this room in like 20 minutes. So I saw that, put together a business case at the time, and we got that role approved to start that. And then the opportunity came up for the social media position a year later, where we're like, you're the fit for this because you've been leveraging social for a whole bunch of means. But what's really funny about that is that how it helped me personally is that because there was no one else in the space at that time, I became a thought leader in Canada pretty quickly. So all the conferences, all that stuff, got on the speaker trail. It wasn't even like I had to pitch talks. It's like, can you please come talk to whoever about social media and higher education? And that's what spurred developing Splash Effect with Hamza Khan, who's one of your previous guests. And then we just became the go-to agency for higher ed social media in Canada. So it spurred an amazing company that we were able to employ a whole bunch of people and create jobs just off of that decision to make an entrepreneurial effort to leverage a new field. So intrapreneurship turned into entrepreneurship in that case.
You mentioned earlier about leaders, and you need the right leaders to create an environment to allow for that. How so?
Yeah, and there's a lot of types of leaders and managers. And I mean, I feel like the longer someone's been in an organization, the less risk averse they'll be in higher ed. And we've done a lot of consulting with other slower moving orgs, and they seem to be a little risk averse. They're happy to be there for 30 years and kind of stay the course, and they don't want to rock the boat too much. And the leaders who are like, let's try this because the outcome and payoff is going to be so much more. And what we'll learn if we don't win or succeed in that endeavor is going to make our team better regardless. So like a leader needs to come into the thinking of, my team has the ability to do more than we're giving in these small job descriptions with such narrow roles and responsibilities. There's so much more than that inside and outside of work. So how do we foster those things? How do we make options for them? So example, like put together a competition for an idea or a business case where you'll get $5,000 to make it happen inside the company. Like actually create the environment for it to happen rather than just say it and hope that it does. Sometimes you have to push them to do so. And I think that's a big part of the leadership, is that you have to learn how to do that rather than just read about the concept, say this could be cool, but like actually turn it into action, create competitions, lead by example, try something new, and like, who wants to work with me on this new idea that I have within it. And then you'll start to see those people who are your superstars and your rock stars who will want to work on you and try to take those new ideas and take ownership of it.
And what are you looking for as a leader to identify those intrapreneurs? See, I even trip over the word already.
There's a couple like natural traits. Like, I think that they're naturally creative. They take initiative without having to be prompted. They're motivated. They are risk taking. They're always sending ideas or articles or things like that to other people. I think those are like the natural traits of it. And then figure out what they do outside of work. You should be bringing your whole self to work regardless, and you should know what your team does outside of work. I bet you a whole bunch of them have some sort of side hustle going on. And if they have that kind of stuff, they'll have that kind of thinking, but they're probably a little bit guarded when they come into the workplace.
Now I'm just thinking of all the benefits of being more entrepreneurial. Because I mean, a lot of those organizations that we're talking about, whether it's these big institutions like post-secondary, government, however you want to look at it, if we're talking about recruitment and retention, what kind of people are we going to recruit and attract if we stick to always doing what we've always done before?
You're going to stick to the people who are always there in the first place. You hire, and like union jobs are a different battle. I mean, like when you get outside of scope, it can be a different issue in that sense, and that's always fun to navigate. But the studies show it does help retention because it gives people more ownership of their work. They care about what happens because they had a part in creating it versus just following the instruction of what they had to do. And retention, you're going to get the best of the best because if they hear that you have this kind of culture, you're throwing opportunities for people to create new things. It's not just you come in, you do your one set of things and that's it, and you move up the chain like this. Like, that's just not going to, in my opinion, bring the best and the brightest anymore.
Now, here's one of the challenges I'm thinking of from an entrepreneurial standpoint is you have the ideas. You want to make it work. You have ideas for groups and stuff, but your leadership's like, that's adorable. That sounds great. We don't have any funding. We don't have any resources. Do you just keep butting your head? Are there ways to break through?
I think it depends on the leader. Like something like I had a lot of these issues in higher ed, especially with faculty. And then I soon realized the only way to get through with specific types of faculty who had that kind of objection was through data. And like, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, like I'm a creative person naturally, and I've become so data driven because I know the power of it. If you show these type of ideas, retain employees, save money over the long run, give more chance for increased revenue, then they'll start to come around. But if you just bring the idea of like, this is something fun we want to do, you're never going to break through. And then sometimes you just got to realize it's just not the right place for you at the same time. If you're going to be stifled with your creativity, you're going to become resentful going to work every single day. So I think it's one, trying to talk your leader's language. The same way in relationships, people have love languages. I'm sure leaders have their own sort of business language that you need to get through to them in that way, even if they're conservative in budget and those kind of things.
It's funny. I've had conversations with communications experts, and I mean social media people that are really good with engaging the public and that sort of thing. And then they are upset because their own ownership or leadership doesn't understand what they do. And I'm like, you're literally a communications person. Why are you not doing the strategy internal that you already do external? It's like switching their brain is different to do a different thing. What helped you the most in getting your ideas heard? Was it being creative? Was it just putting data in a way that told stories?
100%. It's all storytelling. It's storytelling. You want to be able to have the leaders see themselves. It's like, this leader made the decision to do this, and this is how it like worked out, and this is how it made them kind of like look. It's part of the data. It's also like getting them to understand the why. I feel like a lot of people make the business cases with just the what. And it really needs to dive down into the why of like, where is this going to take us? Like, what is the consumer going to, the customer, or internally, what are we going to get out of it? Most good leaders are outcome focused. So being able to tell that story is big. And I think that worked for me for a long time. And I've had different leaders, and I've honestly been blessed to have leaders that kind of leaned into the creativity a little bit. So I didn't have to do the data as much. But I do think it's like getting really good at storytelling and sales. I feel like, and I've said this my whole career, sales is the most under-taught skill in all of business. It's like you think sales, you think like car salesman or like someone upselling something or the people calling you on the telemarketing. But like sales is everything. It's how you interact with people. If you're going on an interview, you're really just selling yourself, your skill set, personality, and those kind of things. If you're selling an entrepreneurial idea, you need to figure out how to position that in a way that your customer, which in this case is your boss or leadership, is going to be able to take it. Learning to sell is just something that everyone should learn how to do.
And unfortunately, it's more people are so focused on what they want to say rather than what people want to hear.
Exactly. I will toot my horn on this all day. I did a 4-year business degree and I had one sales course. My favorite course is probably the only class I got an A in, but it's just something that I feel is just underrated, and like learning things like how to read body language and those kind of things. If you're talking to a leader and you see certain things that's going to excite them, you have to learn how to identify that so you can start going on those points more and more and more.
In most of the organizations I've been entrepreneurial in most of the organizations I've been in because it's just my personality. I'm a little more extroverted. I'm a little bit more looking at ways, problems to fix rather than just check boxes to do. So it came pretty naturally. And by the time I was doing it, it was already something I was doing. And I was going back going, oh, that was entrepreneurial. Oh yeah, that was as well. Now, for the person that doesn't have that engine in them, but they want to move up in their career, they want to think differently, or they want to move differently in an entrepreneurial way, what would you suggest is the first couple of steps to get them in that direction?
I think you should look back on past accomplishments, and like entrepreneurial activities or accomplishments don't have to be broad major wins or projects that change the function of the business. I think 3M sticky note is like the best example of entrepreneurship. It doesn't have to be like that. It could be a process that someone's been doing for 20 years that took 20 hours to do, and you found a way to make that 5 hours. That is a huge entrepreneurial accomplishment to me, because you've used the problem setting mindset to, like that's a huge cost savings if you look at it. So it's like, take a look at your accomplishments, structure it in that way, and be like, oh, I've taken the time, I've fixed a problem. What are other problems I can fix that might be bigger? And like, I think people who are naturally competitive and want to be better at their career are going to want to seek bigger and bigger problems over time without realizing the small ones they fixed before. So it's like, it's about momentum in that way.
Do you feel an introvert could still be an entrepreneurial? Do you feel like neurodivergent people could be as well?
100%. I tell this story sometimes too, is that like my best social media staff I've ever hired was the worst interview I've ever seen in my life. Hands down, I think she said like 19 words the entire time. But a lot of introverts can be extroverted online or communicate in a different way. And luckily, I looked at her profile, her blogs, and her writing before she came in. So I knew I wanted to hire her. But she started so many new things on social that like she probably doesn't even realize other schools were copying after we started doing it. And if you talk to her, and she probably to this day couldn't tell you like how she's done that and like look back on it in that way. And I think I've told her a couple times, but yeah, I think anyone can, because if you look at it at a very macro, I love how you said it's problem solving, and anyone can problem solve. So I think neurodivergent, I think people who are introverted, especially people who are extroverted, can tackle this. But I really just think if you're a natural problem solver, or you like to find things to tackle that are not just the norm, you're going to lean into this no matter what.
Now, I feel like there might be a dark side to this, because I've been an entrepreneur, but it's also been kind of isolating depending on the culture I'm in, because I'm looking at problems to solve. I'm wanting to do the next thing, but that's not necessarily the person beside me in the cubicle over there. So how have you tackled that, or how have you found that?
I think luckily most of this happens in large organizations. I think you're gonna have to find like-minded people and maybe I'm talking in a broad way, but I mean a lot of staff who have been there a long time again don't want to rock the boat. Like, why are we taking on more than we should? And a lot of times you are taking on more than just your standard workload to be able to try to do something like this. But you got to find allies internally. It's like every part in life, you're going to find your circle and your tribe internally. You're going to find like-minded people if you look for them. And that's talking about leaders is like bringing together an innovation council or whatever they're calling it now to let those people naturally congregate rather than forcing them to work with people and teams that are just not going to deliver.
Do you find that intrapreneurship, you notice I'm saying it a lot just so I can train my tongue to say it better?
100%. 100%.
It's like a drinking game podcast, but still, I'm trying. Do you feel it can still help with employee engagement, though? Because to be an intrapreneur, by definition, you're being more engaged at work.
Yeah, I think there's two studies that came out. I wish I can quote them. I might send them to you after this if I can find them quickly. Is that it does spur employee engagement massively, again, because of the ownership of thinking. If someone feels like they have some sort of skin in the game rather than just a paycheck, they will be more aligned with that company moving forward. And that's what you want. You want people who are bought into the whole company, not just their function. And usually larger entrepreneurial projects scale multiple teams after they start to like gain some traction. So you'll start to see cross department engagement that would have never happened before. And those kind of things that I feel like rarely happen. It's like, I know I worked at TMU for 15 years and there would have been people in similar functions to me that I would have never met because that's just not the culture. Is that there's no networking. You kind of stay in your lane, you stay in your department. But a lot of these projects like forced us to go outside. Starting a social media steering committee brought everyone who had any sort of thought in social media together. And we were able to do things like reduce spending on software that we didn't know we were all spending $10,000 on. We could have got a group buy for 15 or whatever is total. And just thought sharing and those kind of things that, again, would have never happened without these kind of like bringing together the right people.
Now, there's like a million studies to tell you that employee retention, employee engagement is really rooted in empowerment. It's rooted in autonomy. How much autonomy should an entrepreneur really have? Like, what is the nice balance of letting people go rogue and do whatever the hell they want versus micromanagement? Like, where's the sweet spot?
Yeah, I think it depends organization to organization. I think there's going to be ones who have more inherent risk that they can take on depending on where they are, but they should still be doing the core function of their job first. And that we can't lose that part, right? That's why I think Google's got a really good balance. If you look at how successful they've been, it's that 80-20 that they do. 80% should be your Google projects, 20% should be on intrapreneurial. I do a lot of time tracking. Every 2 weeks, I audit my calendar. I time block, so I make sure I know what I'm working on. And I would say I'm at that 20 to 25% range of like entrepreneurial thinking and like innovation versus like standard day-to-day procedure.
What would you say to a leader who's kind of looking at entrepreneurship as, well, if we let them do whatever they want, they'll leave? Like it's just a side hustle for them. Eventually, they're just gonna leave the organization. Like, I see people being a little nervous and risk adverse to those entrepreneurs as sort of a too chaotic for them.
I think those people would probably leave anyway. But I also would say, why did you hire them in the first place? I don't think you would have hired them to just do the job. I don't think, and that's if you're a good leader. I mean, if you're like by the book, they should be building 6 widgets a week and that's their job, then we're probably not in the right conversation. But I think you have to look at this person. You don't want them to just do their job. You want them to excel. You do want them to build that affinity towards it. And every good company, like that company in itself probably started with a risk in itself of an entrepreneur starting that company or a school or whatever group of people decided this school needs to be here or this government function needs to be built out. So I think you really need to look back at like, why did you hire them? What did you expect of these people? And like, what's the worst that can really happen if they leave? you're going to find another person. There's so much talent out there now.
With the power switched over to the entrepreneurs now, where they're much more like you just said, there's so much talent out there. As someone who's also just got a new job, congratulations. What are you looking for as an entrepreneur in that next job? What are you going to their website? Like, what are you looking for to know that you're going to fit into that culture?
As a leader or as an employee? Because, yeah, so like as a leader, I think you're going to want to come in and just get a feel of what everyone kind of does. And the people who have that affinity towards a company are naturally going to be like, how do we move this forward? So like those are the people I'm looking for. It's not like if you talk about their day to day, it's like I just come here and I do my job and I leave. They're usually not going to say that, but you can usually get a lot of that. I think that comes back to the sales, being able to read body language and things like that. But as an employee, I would be asking that in the interview stage. If I'm interviewing for a job, like I want to know, how do you feel about innovation and pushing things forward and risk taking? Like that is a standard question I ask whatever job I'm going into. And now I'm at the level I'm at. I'm asking like the top person of the company of like, can I bring this sort of thinking into the company? And if it's not, it's probably not a good fit for me, because I'm just gonna go there and collect a paycheck. And I've been lucky that like pretty much everywhere that I've worked in the last little while has been pretty receptive to that of change and like progression. And like, we don't want to be second best. You're never going to be the best if you just do the bare minimum.
But they're just going to repeat the words that are on the poster behind them. They're always going to tell you that they're innovative. They're always going to tell you that they're never going to they're going to not say different in an interview. So
totally,
they're basically telling you that they don't know their own culture right there in the interview. But as a new person, you don't know.
Yeah, that's very true.
What are the canaries in a coal mine in those first 3-6 months in an organization that maybe this isn't the right fit?
Yeah, and I think you need to start as an employee. When I'm asking those questions as an employee interviewing, I probably have some ideas thought up already. And in that first 30, 60, 90 or whatever that timeline is, I would start to like plant the seeds of those and see what sort of traction they were going to get. Especially if I'm a new employee, I would make sure that I'm delivering and gaining some momentum to show that like, look, I'm doing great at the actual function you're hiring me for. But here's something that I'm brewing on the side that I think is going to help everyone, and why. It comes back to that like business case and selling and like getting them to understand the why I'm thinking like this. And as a leader, I start right away to try to cultivate that environment. It's what are your ideas, and like how are we going to how are we going to take things to a different level? Because if we do things the same way we've been doing it the last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or however long the org's been, we're just going to grow like this. And that's in a well-run company. You're just going to grow a little bit over time. But if you really want to be the best at what you do and you want to stand out from the competition, you're going to have to take some risks. And I'm going to try to do that very quickly wherever I go. But as an employee, I think you need to plant the seed. As a leader, you think you need to plant the seed and see if the watering is not just coming from you, but are those people who promise it from the beginning.
So I'll ask you this last question, which is, as a leader who's yourself trying to cultivate those entrepreneurs in your own organization, I love the idea of the Google's 20%, but what would you recommend an organization do? Is like a couple ideas that they can start to plant those seeds, to get those seeds growing, if we want to really stick to that metaphor.
Yeah, I think a competition or a way to kind of feel out. Like, I don't think you're going to have a huge group of entrepreneurs at every company naturally. I think you're going to have a very select few that are willing to take the risk, and you want to figure out who those people are. So if you put out some sort of internal competition or PD day or whatever it is, like, we're going to come together and we're going to try, or we're going to brainstorm a bunch of ideas, and you're going to try to operationalize it and like build out a project plan of what it can look like. You're going to see those people pretty darn quickly who can like, right. Oh, this is how we do it. And here's how we do it because I know how this organization runs. I think that one works really, really well. I like to do part of this in my quarterly reviews with my staff is like go back on their accomplishments and like, I think we were talking about this earlier, but the problem solving is like, what problems have you really solved in this company or in your function that we've been doing for a while or can be done better, and you've actually done that? And then you'll start to like see a light bulb click in some of them. We're like, oh, like I'm not just building widgets. I'm like building a machine that builds widgets 20% faster than they were built before, kind of thing. I think those are two low hanging fruits, is just being really intentional in your one-on-ones and those kind of things. And two, building a platform for those people to come out and flourish in.
So I'll ask the last question I have to ask, Kareem, which is, what's one simple action people can do right now to improve their relationships at work?
This has nothing to do with intrapreneurship, but I think it's learning how to build empathy really quickly. And I think that goes both ways. I feel like a lot of the time we talk about leaders being empathetic to their staff, and I think it's hugely important. But I also think staff also need to be empathetic to their leaders. Leadership sometimes is a thankless job, and I think we all know that going into it. New leaders don't. I think if you think about emerging leaders and it's their first management job, it's like this, oh my God, I'm a manager now. And then realizing all that comes with that kind of hits like a ton of bricks. So I think it's on staff to realize that they need to be empathetic of what they're going through as well. But as a leader, for something like intrapreneurship, is that you have to understand why people wouldn't want to naturally do it. It might have been they've taken risks before and they didn't come to fruition. Or in a previous job, I actually had this a previous staff come to me before. They're interviewing for a new job right now. They're telling me, it's like, you built my confidence back up because I did so much at another company to try to foster new ideas and do this. And I was just beaten down so much if I failed once or twice. And I think about a lot around failure is rooted in empathy and how we address this as leaders and up and down the chain. It's that failure is okay. We just have to learn from it. So I think the empathy is the big one for me. I know it's a popular term right now, but I really do believe in it. That's why we started Skills Camp, and the soft skills is one of the most important soft skills I think anyone can develop.
And it's so funny that you started that phrasing by saying it had nothing to do with intrapreneurship and basically reinforced how much it has everything to do with intrapreneurship.
I'm hoping in a year we won't get that autocorrect anymore, or it will actually autocorrect, because it's going to be so important moving forward coming out of COVID. A lot of the best ideas happen in a recession and after mass layoffs and things like that. These are all really tough things that people are feeling right now, but the best ideas in the world come from times like this.
That is Kareem Rahaman. He is the new executive director at the Clover Schools, and he has had a hell of a career as an entrepreneur in the public education space. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. This was amazing.
And that'll do it for another episode of Relationships at Work. I'm Russel Lolliker. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have a moment, please jump on your favorite podcast app. Looking at the statistics, it's probably Apple. Just head on over there and please leave us a star rating, saying how much you've enjoyed the podcast and how much it's worthwhile, at least if it has been for you. Take care.